Why can't I talk words? Okay, there we go. Nice and coated. Hi everyone, it's Art Mama Grande here. Just wanted to talk to you guys about, I guess, the right way to gesso a canvas. So if you watched my last video, you would know that this is the canvas stretcher that I re-stretched this fabric on. This was recycled bed linens, so it's actually like a linen cotton, and I stretched it, and now we're going to prime it, and then you're going to see what it can look like when it's been finished. So first things first is I realized my last video was on a glass table and you guys could see my legs through it, so I just took an old painting of mine that's on a board, and I'm going to just use the back of it as my table. So I think eventually I'll gesso this black, but I might even do that today. Yeah, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss, I guess, tightness of the fabric. So if you're going to be stretching your own canvases or reusing frames like I often do, one thing you want to do is decide how tight you want it to be. So if you can see as I'm pushing down, right, like there's a little bit of pressure there, but it's not super tight, right? It's not like a drum. It's not bouncing off. I use that example pretty often when we're talking about it, but in my previous video. One thing that I find that I like is that I really like my canvas to be tight, because as I'm painting, what happens is you push and slowly the fabric gets more and more loose. So I really liked it to start off really tight like a drum, so you can like flick it with your finger and it'll make like a drum noise. Okay, that's like one of my favorite things. But if you do it too tight, what happens is then your frame, if it's not built really strong, especially if you're reusing store-bought ones, often what happens is it'll bow over time, and it'll kind of get like a wonky diagonal angle to it. And then when you want to hang it on a wall, it won't hang flat. It'll hang with like one corner poking out, which is never fun. And it makes it really difficult to hang things too. So one thing you want to do is find like a really nice balance. So when I stretched it with a little bit more give, and then what I'm going to do is I will prime it, and then after this dries, then we'll have like a better idea of what it's going to look like when I'm ready to start painting on it, basically. Okay, and I do have a couple other canvases that are currently being painted, but I'll show you, like, I guess, the tightness of the fabric, so you kind of get the idea of like what it'll look like when it's finished. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is an unprimed canvas. Next, you're going to need a container of gesso. So this is, like, when I say gesso, like that's the brand. Like you would also just say primer, like a painting primer. But gesso has kind of become the brand of choice, kind of like how you say Kleenex instead of tissue. So it's just a really popular brand. It's very affordable, and I find that, you know, this is it's trusty. It's never done anything weird, so why reinvent the wheel, kind of deal. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open our primer. Actually, I'm just going to move this over so you can see what it looks like on the inside. So when you take it off, so like I said, it's black primer, right? Like this is a black primer, that's the lid, okay? Now when you have any primer, if it's white, black, or gray, yeah, so when you see one, the first thing you want to do is get your bang for your buck. It's not the most expensive product, but when it comes to primer, more is more. I tend to prime things 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I only prime them once or twice, depending on the painting I want to do. When I was in art school, I got into painting on really smooth surfaces. So I actually did an entire project where I painted on glass. I actually have a couple windows that I'm currently going to be painting a new series on as well. I actually just finished some last year as a gift for my sister's boyfriend. Yeah, so one thing that I really like to do is decide like what kind of surface I want to paint on. So I think for this one, I'm going to do 4 layers of gesso. And the reason I'm doing 4 is that afterwards, after 4 layers, it can be really chunky, but if you have sandpaper or a fine sandpaper, you can sand the top of it, and it becomes like a really nice smooth surface. And when I'm priming, I tend to like flat brushes or angle brushes, and the reason for that is so that I can get like right into like the sides and the corners. And when you're using gesso, like, don't use your nice brushes, obviously, because, well, like, they can be good quality brushes, but I wouldn't say use like your squirrel tail brushes or your hog's hair brushes or your sable brushes. Like, that's not where you use them. Besides the fact that they're usually very, very small, and it's going to take you a lot longer just to get it done. But I actually really like just the fact that like larger, cheaper brushes tend to cover the space faster, and it gives you more coverage and more even distribution. And then if, you know, the brush gets ruined after like a year or two, it's not the end of the world to get rid of it because you didn't invest like $170 in a brush. And there are brushes that cost that much, believe it or not. So yeah, that's it. So I'm going to get started, and I will see you guys after the first layer, okay? Good. Okay, so I just finished the first layer. I try my best to every layer go in the same direction. So for this first one, I went in this direction, up and down, and then for the next one after it dries, I will go side to side, and I will alternate between every layer. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back, and I will do the same kind of thing, back and forth, and you also want to make sure that you get your edges. So I haven't done my edges yet. I'm going to do that now, and I'm not going to come back until all 4 of them are done, okay? Okay. I'm just going to do one more layer, and then we're going to talk about how it looks, okay? Okay, so that's it for the actual gesso. I'm going to let this dry. Any place that you see any bumps, like maybe a flaw in the fabric, or any kind of like maybe place where the gesso has gathered, like you want to get that as smooth as possible because we don't want any edges We don't want any raised surfaces because that'll actually really affect how the paint goes on when we're ready to start making art with this piece. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. And in the meanwhile, actually, so this is what a finished canvas will look like. Do you guys hear how tight that is? Like a drum, like I said. Remember we were talking about the drum sound? So this is a painting I'm currently working on. It's an oil painting. It is on a black gessoed canvas. See how I did the sides? Here's an example. Okay, so it'll look very similar to this. This is like what it'll look like. Okay, so once this is dry, I can start a painting just like this. And if that's something you guys want to see, like do you guys want me to show you different paints and how I start paintings? Do you want me to like tell you anything about painting? Is that something that you guys want to see? Or do you want to just keep seeing like preparation stuff like this where I give you a starting point and then you can take it and go in whatever direction you want? It's really up to you guys. Yeah, so that's basically it. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, crises, catastrophes? Any of those things are welcome. Just let me know in the comments below whether or not videos like this were helpful. This definitely has helped me save myself a lot of money rather than buying pre-stretched, pre-gessoed canvases. I really find that doing the work yourself can not only be really gratifying, but also just, you know, saves that pocketbook of yours. So that's everything. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everybody.